Hello, my friend. Today we're talking to Hampton from Hybrid Calisthenics about how hard you should be training, if you should train to failure. We talk about his workout plan and a few other cool things. I highly suggest you watch all the way through this video for maximum gains. But if you're in a rush, you can click on any of the chapters that I have marked down below here if you want to see specific topics, or you can click on this little settings icon at the bottom right of your screen and change the playback speed to be a little bit faster, and we will talk quicker with that. So with all of that out of the way, let's get over to Hampton. If you want to quickly introduce yourself, I would think that anyone that is watching this video probably already is familiar with your face, but just a really quick who you are and what you do.
Hey, my name is Hampton. My brand and channel is called Hybrid Calisthenics, where we talk about fitness, calisthenics, and we also delve into happiness, health, and overall aspects of fitness, where we try to have a good human experience here on Earth.
Nice. And how long have you been training?
Well, I mean, I've been into fitness my entire life. I was always a very active kid. I was one of those kids where if you sit down for a moment, he's running off naked, when he's 2 years old or 3 years old. But so I was always into fitness. They're always drawn towards body weight stuff. When I was 17, at the time, I was working 12 hours a day. But at night, we watched TV. And at the time, we used Hulu. We used Hulu. And it was big, but it wasn't quite as big as it is now. And every 15 minutes or so for an hour-long program, there would be a commercial break. And I'd be like, well, I'm just gonna do like as many good push-ups as I can do during that commercial break. So that was about 10 years ago. And around age 22, 5 years ago, I started having a more structured routine, and that was my introduction, exploration, and pursuit of progressive calisthenics.
Very nice. Cool. So we're going to get right into it. Someone walks up to you and says, "Hey, Hampton, should I train to failure?" What is your response?
Well, I mean, it really depends on the person, the exercise he's doing, and his goals, among other things, other factors that I'm probably not even thinking of. If you are training to do a handstand, for example, no, I like in general, I would not say train to failure because, like if you're doing a handstand and we do a couple of reps and then you're starting to get it, and then you get so tired and you're exhausted that you're falling over, you're landing on your head, you're injuring your spine. Something like that, where it's a skill, no, don't train to failure. But the simple answer that I can give right now, honestly, is if you definitely want to build muscle, sometimes train to failure. I think the research and there's like even personal experience, it's kind of hard to deny that, using high resistance and training to failure can yield great gains, so to speak, when it comes to muscle building. Strength, and especially skill, a little bit more debatable, but I think for almost anything, for almost anyone on some exercise, there is benefit to sometimes training to failure. That's my summary.
And that's pretty much where I land on it, is that it's just another kind of tool for training. It's not something that you necessarily need to be using all the time, but it's something that's in the bank when you need that extra intensity. It's there. But I think a lot of the times I see people on one side or the other, when they give out programs, it's like pull-ups to failure, push-ups to failure. And I don't think that's always best, especially for newcomers. I think that's just going to be way too much intensity right off the bat. You're probably going to get gains even doing less than you think you'd need to, and saving that tool for when you're struggling to make that progress as you start to get more advanced. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point. Is yes, theoretically, training to failure can yield great muscle gains. But if you're a newbie and you're sore for 3 weeks after that, and you twist your elbow and you fall on your head and you're out of commission for 3 months, well, then functionally it didn't really help, did it? Right? So, and I mean, like this idea, which, might stem from self-hatred, I don't have a source on that we need to punish ourselves with pain, and that's how we grow, is not always necessarily true. I mean, there is some research that shows, and I mean, some people will debate this, and I mean, that's something your audience can research on their own, that muscle damage that we thought was essential to growing muscle actually needs to be healed before the muscle itself can grow. If you want, we can email afterwards. I can link to the study after this. But there's some research that shows, like the muscle damage needs to be healed before the muscle itself can actually grow. So they're correlated, but it doesn't necessarily need to be linked in that sense. Now, since we're on the calisthenics, one of the like benefits that's overlooked of calisthenics is we are able to train to failure in a way where it's a lot more difficult with weights. So let's go somewhat like more advanced than average first. So, like the one hand pull up, not a one arm pull up, the one hand where your other hand's gripping your wrist. Mine's on my phone, but the one hand pull up, or the one where uneven pull ups, whatever you want to call them. See, you're adjusting the resistance on your working arm. Okay, so that's something where you can train to near failure or way beyond what people can think. At first, assist a lot, or at first you're not assisting a lot with your other arm. Okay, as you get more tired and you can't do more reps, keep the strength led with that arm that you're doing the pull-up with until you get more and more tired, until you're supporting more with your assisting arm than you are with your working arm. Okay, and you've brought that bicep and those pulling muscles to near failure. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. An easier one, you have some gym rings or something. You're doing squats. Let's say you're, intermediate or beginner, something like you're doing assisted squats. Assist yourself less and less and less until you're not able to get off the ground. I don't know how safe that is, but I mean, you can bring yourself to failure. That's a lot harder to do when you're squatting the same amount of weight. Like you're squatting, let's say 200 pounds, like eventually you're not going to be able to push up, and then you got to get out under the bar, or you're going to injure yourself.
Right.
But if you're assisting yourself, you can adjust that resistance. So that's an advantage that people don't exploit with calisthenics, is our ability to sometimes train to failure.
I think that's a great point, and I agree. I think that's something people don't really think about, especially even bodybuilders using that as a way to get that type of exercise, getting that type of accommodating resistance. I think that's totally underrated. Do you use RPE or reps in reserve in your own training cycle? Do you pay attention to that, or are you using something else, just like a set volume or something like that?
Right now, my training is it's kind of like yin and yang, in which it's actually relevant to this discussion on training to failure, because every other day I do unilateral, somewhat advanced calisthenics. So, for example, one arm pull-ups, and I keep the volume ultra low, like 1 or 2 reps, and I do many, many reps throughout the day.
Okay.
So
more greasing the groove.
Greasing the groove, but that would be similar to that. It's greasing the groove ideology, but that kind of training methodology has been around since before that. Yeah. And I like Pavel, by the way. I like Pavel. But every other day, on days when I'm not doing that, because I can stay pretty fresh doing that. It's different from greasing the groove, I guess, in that I'm not taking advantage of the volume because I change it up so often. I have like 5 or 6 different exercises that I'm doing throughout the week on different days of the week. So like some of them only get like one day where I'm doing that, or 1 or 2 days where I'm doing that. But the interesting part is every other day I'm using isometrics. I'm a big fan of this product called the IsoChain, which can measure resistance. And I'm basically doing isometrics 3 sets to failure on those.
Okay. That's such an interesting training plan.
Yeah. So one, as pretty much as far from failure as possible, basically where I want to exert as much force as I can during that single rep. Okay. And then I just rest, and if I do too many, then when I come back later to it, I'm going to be tired. I won't be able to exert as much force because I exhausted myself earlier that day. So that's why I'm staying fresh. So I want to exert as much force, and I want to do it as often as possible on those days. The next day, I'm not even really sore because my body is acclimated to that. But that day where I'm not really sore, I take myself to failure in multiple muscle groups.
Okay. Well, that was not the answer I was expecting at all. That's something, a training style I'd never heard of. Is that something that you just kind of developed on your own, or was that something that you saw?
It's something I'm experimenting with.
Okay.
And I mean, someone can probably pull a study where it shows that that's not optimal, but it's something that I want to explore right now. It's something I'm having a lot of fun with. And just to give someone a functional example, just an idea, let's say on Wednesday, I would train 1 arm pull-ups. I would do multiple throughout the day, 1 rep, many sets. And the next day on Thursday, I would do seated rows, because the if you know the IsoChain, just look, if you don't have to buy it, but I mean, if you look it up, you see what it is. It's an isometric barbell. I would do seated rows to failure. I would do bicep curls to failure, stuff like that.
Okay. Well, that's super interesting. I appreciate the letting me know how that works, because I think that might be something I kind of want to experiment with a little bit. I stick with kind of that more doing just shy of failure and then working my way up, periodizing it, working somewhat mixing with bent arm and straight arm work, upper lower
Yeah.
days, things like that, which I think is more of like a classic bodybuilding style, or the scientific approach of bodybuilding right now. But
Yeah, yeah, I think it is. Well, and that's really where I got to. That's where I got my base skills,
yeah.
was staying like 1 or 2 reps shy of failure. I pushed myself hard, but I didn't go to failure. So I mean, every once in a while I would try it, but it wasn't part of my structure, I guess.
Yeah. And where I've gotten most of my injuries is when I'm pushing myself to failure or trying to go beyond that. And I think that's something that people don't often think about or realize, that there is that much bigger risk associated when going to failure, especially as someone with less experience, less knowledge of how your body works, and maybe the things that aren't as strong. You can injure yourself much easier as a beginner. So it might be a training to failure thing, more useful for those more experienced athletes like yourself, and maybe not so much for those people that are just starting off.
Well, and I think it depends on how you're training to failure in that sense, right? Like with isometrics, your body isn't really moving at all. There's really not that much chance of failure unless you really try to hurt yourself doing, or you're very your body isn't used to the levels of force you're putting through it. Another potential way that you could train to failure in a possibly safer way, if you're like intermediate to advanced, is with variable resistance. By the way, I'm not associated with any of these products. Like, you can reach out to these companies. I don't know. I don't know these people.
Everyone knows that you're not trying to push any products on anyone. So
right,
no worries.
Right. So yeah. So but I mean, because I'm about to bring up another product. But so I brought up the ISO chain. Another thing that I haven't tried, but I follow the guy who pushes it, called the X3 bar, which you've probably seen ads for at some point.
I think I have.
But I mean, like or dislike him, or agree or disagree, I think he brings up some interesting points. Basically, he trains with resistance bands. And now his thing is like resistance bands through traditional barbell movement. So he's doing like bicep curls, deadlifts, I think like pressing, like it's like a bench press, but he's standing and doing it forward. And that's something that we could do with push-ups, for example. If there was a baseboard that we could do and we loop the resistance band around us, that's variable resistance. Now, think about training to failure on that. You know, you're doing regular push-ups, you use a band that has the suitable resistance for your skill level and your strength level, and you're pushing, and eventually you're stronger, you know, when your arm is almost locked out. Like he says 7 times stronger. I'm sure he has some study to back that up, but I'm not sure. Eventually you're going to fatigue that range, and then you won't be able to lock out anymore. You'll only be able to go up halfway, you know, and then 10 more reps, you're only moving down. Like, you're doing a push-up, you're only doing like a couple of inches off the ground, because that resistance band is changing the amount of resistance from your body. So that's one way you could train to failure. And I mean, because he's pushing his product, he cites a lot of research about like why that's good for muscle building, so on and so forth. Again, just like anything, it's debatable to some extent. You know,
Definitely.
It's controversial to some extent. But just off the top of my head, that's one way we can train to failure. Again, possibly safer than if you're just bench pressing 300 pounds. And you're like, well, I'm going to go to failure. What is failure there? When it drops on your head? You know, I don't know. So and the different ways to train to failure, some definitely safer than others. Maybe even one that I'm not thinking of, that someone else can think of or do some research on, or one that's popular. I think there are definitely some safe ways to train to failure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think I got a ton of great content from you. I appreciate you jumping on the call so much.
I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. Thanks again for jumping on. Have a good one.
Yeah, of course. We'll see you.
Bye.